Okay, this is a video on just the case presentation. As you can see in the outcome measures, it's, I think, 40% of the grade. So it's a huge one. There's an accompanying Zoom link for students because they don't, they're so syllabus shocked the first day. So I have a Zoom link that also explains this. And like I mentioned earlier, the only difference is there's not a reflection paper anymore. So I think the link says there is. Okay, so here's how we do it. The first day of class, at the end of class, and not a second before, students are to send you their top 3 choices of models. I could assign students their own case, but I really don't want to do that because it's a big project and I want them to be interested in what they're doing. So it is a puzzle to figure out how many students you have. You have 8 models. Most people will be paired because you're going to have 15 or 16 students. And then most everyone gets their top 3. Not everyone gets their first, but usually they get their top 3. So there are partners, but the only thing they share is the presentation. They do their own literature review, their own case study, their own interaction. And then we'll have half the class watch student A, and half the class watch student B. Okay, so the first thing they do is they get their model and they figure out what the model's about. And they do that by doing a literature review, not an annotated bib. There is also a Zoom recording. If you look at the appendix on appendix 4, in the rubric, appendix 4 is right above the rubric, how to create a literature review. Please watch this Zoom recording and see document on the resource section of the LMS. So there's a document about how to write a literature review. Many of these students have not done one before. It is not an annotated bib, and the Zoom recording explains that. I have sent you already a really good example of one and a really poor example of one. So hopefully that will help. They do the literature review, and that will tell them what population their model works with. For example, we're not going to use EMDR with a 5-year-old who's having behavior problems. EMDR is usually, veterans or some trauma, car wreck, sexual assault, something like that. They will do a further review of the literature to identify skills and techniques. So not only do they have to learn about the population, but they have to learn how to do it. They have to be 5 recent scholarly sources outside of the classroom materials. And there has to be a critique in one of those sources of something about the model. After that, they have to do that before they develop their case study. They will try to do those in reverse order, but you have to know who it works with before you do the case. So 2 or 3 pages worth 10% is the case study. Do not use a case that is realistic to your life or your family members or your close friends as your clients. Do not use your mom. Do not use your clients, for goodness sakes. This is a person maybe in another class or an acquaintance. They need to be acting. It cannot be a real life experience. There's all kind of ethical issues, and that's a whole practice discussion. Demographic information, the whole list is on page 11. I'm not going to read the bullet points, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like 11 bullet points. They have to use the preparatory empathy triangle. They have to use the Liberation Health model. They have to talk about the eco map. So this case study is helping them think like a social worker. This is taking them out of LPC world into policy impacts, cultural impacts, the Liberation Health model. I'm realizing, it says the best way for you to think like a social worker is to apply the Liberation Health model. Then they take their person who's willing to act with them, who has signed an informed consent, and they demonstrate the model using their case study. They can use a classmate or an adult, cannot use anybody under 18. It has to have 3 skills, and the session should last 40 minutes, but we're only watching 30. You and I, the instructor, are watching the whole thing, but the students are only watching 30 minutes. They will record this on Zoom and make sure it is shared publicly so we can see it. And they will put the link on top of their case study document so that everybody can get in there and find out where to watch it. They have to use advanced techniques, not just Schulman skills. We're assuming they're using Schulman skills, but advanced practice techniques is what we're looking for. So CBT, they're going to be doing, cognitive restructuring, looking at distortions, things like that. Then they do a class presentation with their partner, and they are engaging learning styles. They might use a short YouTube video, they might do a short activity, but they do have to include the muddiest points of the async to answer any questions there, and 3 substantive questions for the class to discuss. So we're really trying to make this a discussion-based presentation. I make sure they watch the async before they present, which of course they should have, but even as they're preparing, make sure they watch the async so they don't repeat anything. There's a place on the LMS for the consent form, so you can make sure they've gotten proper consent. That's good practice. And the class presentation should not exceed 30 minutes. That is the class, that is the case study. And if you look on page 15 and 16 of the syllabus, it has the rubric that you're going to print out and literally sit there and grade as you watch the presentation. What I do is I take that rubric, I grade it, I scan it, and I send it back to them with their final grade. It has everything that they need to include in the case study, the review of literature, the presentation, and I send that back to them on email. And remember, there is a whole thing on the preparatory empathy triangle, the recording, the triangle itself. They should be completely resourced in the syllabus with the difference between an annotated bib and a lit review, the PET. They would have gone through the Liberation Health, so they'll know that. So that is the case study. And like I mentioned, it is 10% for the literature review, 10% for the case study, 10% for the skill demonstration, and 10% for the presentation. So 40% of their grade. There really is no excuse to not understand this, because I've done it, explained it in so many ways on the syllabus in terms of the students and that Zoom recording. Remember, the Zoom recording talks about a reflection paper, and we do not do that anymore. So that is the case study.